everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm watching the numbers roll in. So if you are here for writing your own story with Diego Tovar, you are in the right place. While we continue to let everybody roll in, I'm going to go ahead and do some housekeeping rules just to get us all on the same page here. So welcome. Hopefully you are watching this on YouTube. If you are not and you are watching it on another platform, you should be able to still see a comment section below. This comment section works very similar to Zoom and the Q&A feature. So if you have any questions throughout this presentation or afterwards during the Q&A, go ahead and drop those down in there. You do need a YouTube or a Google account to be able to access this. So if you are not comfortable doing so or having trouble creating that account, my email is on the screen right here, and I will also put it in the chat here in the comments in a second. And you are more than welcome to email me any questions, and I will make sure that those get brought to Diego's attention. Before I turn you over to Diego, I want to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Sophie Matthews. I use the she series pronouns, and I am the Student and Recent Graduate Engagement Specialist with the Colorado State University Alumni Association. And I am thrilled to be able to welcome you all to meet Diego today. I want to go ahead and thank all of our CSU Alumni Association members who are watching or maybe watching after this live presentation as well. Your support and your belief in the RAM community is crucial to everything we do here, and we are so grateful for you. So thank you very much. If you have any questions about membership or you haven't heard about it before, let me know and connect with me via email. I'd be happy to talk with you more. Okay, well, now enough from me. As people are still rolling in here, I would love to turn it over to Diego. Thank you again for joining us. Diego is a recent graduate from CSU who graduated in 2022, and he is the self-published Amazon best-selling author of The Ascendants, Empire of Ruin, The Red Siege, Tell It to the Tombs, The Wrath That Waits, and The Man on the Ring trilogy. You all are in for a treat by getting to connect with him. So without further ado, Diego, take it away.
Thanks, Sophie, and hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here today. My name is Diego Tovar. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm a proud CSU alum, a sci-fi writer, and an environmental advocate. And today I'm here to talk about my journey through authorship, but also to leave you with all the tips and tricks. So if you're aspiring to write or create stories yourself, I'm going to help you get that done. And this is a picture of me with my most recent book, The Ascendants, Empire of Ruin. So what's my story? There are three essential parts that majorly contribute to what I've done as a writer so far. And so the first is my love for nature. I love the environment. I love animals, landscapes, and the way it grounds me. Second, I've always been a daydreamer. So most of my ideas hit me when I'm on a walk and just letting my mind drift. And I let that inspiration of our natural world guide me to my plots. And the third is my passion for a just, sustainable future through my environmental policy work. So as Sophie mentioned, I graduated from Colorado State University in May of 2022 with an undergrad in ecosystem science and sustainability, and I was a National UDAW Scholar class of 2021. And I went on to get my master's at American University in global environmental policy, and have had two experiences working for Congressman Lloyd Doggett, who represents Austin, Texas in the House of Representatives, and that's where I'm originally from. I've also had the chance to work for Congressman Joe Neguse, who represents the lovely Fort Collins, and as well as Boulder. And then I've been able to work at the EPA, where I developed climate adaptation plans with Indigenous communities, ensuring that their voices are at the forefront of decision-making processes. And during the Biden-Harris administration, I worked on environmental justice management in the White House Council on Environmental Quality. And I've also had the opportunity to work for the Navajo Nation in their Washington, D.C. office, lobbying on the Hill to end toxic uranium mining, and specifically looking at health, environmental, and cultural degradation, and supporting Indigenous rights and sovereignty. And so this all led me to my current role at the Rachel Carson Council, which is an environmental NGO that was founded by Rachel Carson's closest family and friends after she passed away. And so as many of you may know, she wrote Silent Spring, which drew attention to the negative effects of DDT on the environment, spurring on this environmental movement throughout the 1960s and 1970s that's carrying on today. And so there I'm the director of campus and civic engagement, where I travel to universities and give guest lectures on environmental justice. I build local coalitions and I connect with students and provide them amazing opportunities for growth to spur on the next generation of environmental leaders. And so what I've learned through my professional career so far is that environmental policy is inherently connected to self. And self is connected to personal story, which makes up an intersectional community. And that provides a beautiful wide scope of environmentalism and brings power to unique voices. And I try to shed light on that through my writing, and that's why I write. So the power of storytelling allows people to feel connected to topics they may never personally experience or know about. And there's something powerful about how narrative can bridge people from all different backgrounds together to be immersed into a single story. And so here's some pictures, and that was me on graduation day outside the Warner College of Natural Resources. And the picture below it is me at Rocky Mountain National Park, the old stomping grounds when I was at CSU. And then the top right is me and my novel, Tell It to the Tombs, in a bookstore in Austin, Texas. And then lastly, that's an image of me on Capitol Hill doing my policy thing. So now that you know a little bit about my background, you may be wondering, how do you actually get the words on the page? How do you create unique characters and worlds for these characters to run around in? And I've always been a huge sci-fi nerd, and I realized in 2020, as I had the privilege to stay home during COVID, that while it was fun to consume stories, I had so many ideas that I needed to get off my chest, and I wanted to create, and not for the goal of selling books, but rather for the fun of building narrative. And so I remember when I began writing in 2020, I opened a Word document, stared at the daunting empty screen and thought, what the heck am I going to type? And I didn't type anything good, to be honest. And instead, I took a step back and I typed out my favorite shows and movies and what they did well. I thought about the political intrigue and character building of Star Wars. George Lucas, who's the writer of Star Wars, is my creative inspiration. And I thought about what he was trying to tell, the fall of a grand republic, the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker turning into Darth Vader. How did he create those tropes? And so I studied the stories. And then I also thought of Planet of the Apes. Specifically, what always stuck out to me was the humanization of these apes and how we grow to root for the main character, Caesar, who will do anything to protect his family. And so I focused on looking at how to make these characters feel believable, even if they're not human. And I also thought about my favorite TV show of all time, which is The Walking Dead. And The Walking Dead to some might be a bunch of people on the road fighting zombies. And to me, it was always about a ragtag group of survivors with deeply different backgrounds and paths they form to create a family that they'll fight to the death for. And how did the writers of The Walking Dead bring people who would never be friends before an apocalypse to make them family, add the action, the tension, the suspense, but still have the emotions driving the characters in the story forward? And like I mentioned before, once I took all this into account, I thought of policy, environmental policy. I thought of narrative, personal stories that I've heard, my own personal story. And then I would go on walks and bike rides to let nature kind of take over and just allow me to be in a headspace where the ideas would come to fruition. And so here's some more images. And that's me at Rock Creek Park, where I'm in Washington, D.C., and I'm currently in Washington, D.C. And that's an image of Caesar, the main character from Planet of the Apes. There's Yoda and some Wookiees from Star Wars. We got Rick and Michonne, the main characters from The Walking Dead. And then that's the beautiful landscape of the Navajo Nation, which is where I first came to realize policy is about human stories and not just about the graphs and the clunky, fancy legislative words. And that really helped me form my first stories as I began to write. So when you write, if this is something you want to do, I encourage you to think about what inspires you and what good do you want to see from the world, what stories resonate with you and why, and what's your place that your mind can be free and drift to. And that is when the perfect idea will hit you. So let's talk books. So here are some of my personal favorites out of the 8 I've written thus far. And I'm going to start with my Amazon bestseller here, The Ascendants, Empire of Ruin, which is the book cover on your screen with the big old alien eye. And this story at its heart is an epic young adult sci-fi with rebellion, betrayal, alien invasions, political intrigue, and it follows a ragtag group of teens trying to save the planet from not only a corrupt regime that prioritizes technology over its citizens, but doing so during the midst of a planetary alien invasion. So it's a story through the lens of a young protagonist who is thrust into this impossible circumstance, forcing him to make hard choices about loyalty, leadership, friendship, survival. And I've always been fascinated by stories where the real enemy isn't just an external force, but also the systems that people build and the struggle of those who dare to challenge them. And the book next to it, with a corroded barn cover look, is called Tell It to the Tombs. And now this is an adult survival thriller. It's gritty with a big environmental twist. And it follows two best friends with tragic backstories that are trying to make their way to a safe zone in Denver, Colorado. And this book I wrote during my time at CSU. But the real danger isn't just the hostile world around them in that book. It's the secrets they unravel along their journey. And so I got the idea actually while driving along the windy road from Fort Collins to Estes, Colorado. And I can't remember the name of the road off the top of my head, but something about that road with the rock cliffs had me enticed to write something where people were traveling along it by foot. And then I thought, well, what if survival wasn't just about the present, but what if it's also about facing the ghosts of your past? And so this book is about endurance, about how people cling to hope, even when the world they live in gives them no reason to have any. And then the book over here with the castle cover is called The Wrath That Waits. And that's a novella I wrote at the beginning of this year. And it follows three creatures in medieval times as they ransack and destroy villages to maintain balance and prevent something far worse from awakening, known as the Wrath in the story. And what I love about this book is that it's told from the monster's perspective. So you have three different POVs from three different monsters, forcing the reader to question who the real villains are. And are they truly evil? Or are they just fulfilling a duty to keep much greater horror at bay? In the heart of the story is all about ego, power, control, how civilizations rise and fall, and who actually keeps the balance in check. And this idea hit me while thinking about our political system, specifically how societies fear or worship certain forces. And I thought, what if monsters weren't just mindless creatures, but were crafters of balance, and balance for who? And so that's how that story was born there. And then lastly, on the far right, I have my trilogy of novellas called The Man on the Ring. And this idea came to me, and I also wrote these stories during my undergrad. And so these stories came to me in the most unexpected way while walking through the woods. It was windy, trees were swaying, and I remember I looked up to the big blue open sky, and then I just had this thought, what if Earth had an industrial ring around it like Saturn, but it was entirely man-made? And then this question spiraled and became the foundation of the story, which follows a climate refugee living on that very industrial ring that encircles Earth. And in this future, Earth is no longer the blue planet we know. It has become a place people flee from. And so the book explores how civilizations treat climate refugees, the trauma of displacement, and how survival isn't just about finding safety, but about finding a place to belong. And just when my protagonist starts to carve out a life, he finds himself entangled in a Milky Way wide civil war as all planets and moons in my story are colonized. And so I love building immersive worlds, whether it's dystopian wastelands, a space empire, or a future Earth ravaged or perfected by climate change or solutions. And so each book is my way of imagining what if scenarios that play in my head. And so science fiction isn't just about spaceships and laser battles, crazy scenarios and robots. It's about exploring big ideas, and climate change to me is the biggest challenge of our time. And I like to use this genre as my playground to understand how the world works. So some questions I find myself asking, especially when creating climate-based fiction: what are modern day power dynamics like between communities? How can I provide a lens to show how marginalized and privileged communities aren't homogenous or all the same? What kind of world would we live in if certain industry took power? Or what would happen if we became more grounded to our ecosystems and approached the world through a cyclical lens, which is where everything is connected, in comparison to not a linear lens where everything is separated? And I take these big questions, attach the motive or reason I care about them, and translate that through my fiction writing. And if you're passionate about, say, gender equality or healthcare, civil rights, human rights, the list goes on, my point is, everyone has their own passions and interests, but how can you turn those ideas into digestible information for a larger audience to want to continue to flip the page? And I'm about to dive into that in a little bit more detail. And that image is of Horsetooth Reservoir, as many of you know. And I took that last September when I was at the Rocky Mountain Showdown. And then that's me last spring in Washington, D.C., enjoying the cherry blossoms, which is always a highlight of, living in D.C. in the spring. So how did I actually go from idea to creation to physical book? And the first thing I learned is to just get the words on the page. Your first draft will be bad. Accept it. Keep writing. No writer ever completes a first draft and thinks it's perfection. And what I encourage you to do in a first draft is to think about, are the main ideas there? Then give yourself space from the book. Go away from it for a couple weeks. Start something new. Clear your mind. And then when you come back to it, editing is where the real magic happens. So, sometimes I finish a book draft and I'll be done with it in just a couple weeks. And then I let it go and I start working on something else. And then when I come back, that's when the magic happens. So during the editing process, you think about every line of dialogue. Is it needed? Could the exposition have told the reader the information you're trying to convey? Do your characters serve purpose? Do characters have names that sound different enough so your readers don't get confused? Does your chapter have its own start and end point? Do you have cliffhangers? Are you balancing showing versus telling? That's a real important one. So showing in writing immerses the reader by using sensory details, actions, and dialogue to convey emotions and events. And then telling simply states the information without evoking a sensory experience. So for example, a telling sentence could be, she was nervous after reading the letter. And then a showing sentence would be, her hands trembled as she gripped the letter, eyes scanning the words over and over. So as you can see, that showing example provides more of an in-depth analysis of what the character is feeling and provides a more sensory reaction for the reader. And so my biggest lesson for you at the end of the day is just to write. For me, it became habitual. I try to move my body every day and I try to write every day. And that's what works for me. And I'm not saying you have to be super productive in your writing every day either, but just get those words out and let your mind find clarity, because a lot of times to remove that clutter, if you just type away, eventually something will click. And now many people like to fully plot out their books before writing as well. And it's helpful if you need that visual for where the story starts. But for me, in my first drafts, I never do that. I have a gist of overall what's going to happen. And I rather think of the opening moment, like what's driving the story on the first page, who's in that scene, and then I let the character take over. When I write, I'm basically method acting in my head. I'm staring at the screen, but I'm not like really there typing all the words. My vision is inside this character's world, in their world, feeling what they feel. So my point is, let the characters tell you what happens. And I think that's essential. And that makes believable characters. They know best. And if it's daunting to plan out an entire book before writing it, then don't. If it's daunting not to plan, then plan. There's not a secret formula for one right way to write a book. So this is me at a book signing from my first book I wrote back in 2021. That's an image of one of my books at Book People in Austin, Texas. And this is just an image of me with my trilogy of novellas, the Man on the Ring series, back when I completed those and was super excited. So of course, had to get the pick. So let me save you some struggle, and I want to tell you 3 things I wish I knew before I started writing, or things that have helped me grow. So your first draft, number 1 is your first draft is never your best draft, and that's okay. It's about the journey, and I compare it a lot to hiking. You never quite know what you're going to see along the hike, but you have a picture generally of what the end destination is. So just roll with it. Roll with your writing, see what happens. Everything will fall into place how it's meant to be. Number 2 is creating stories is deeply personal, right? Your thoughts are literally going onto a page for people to read. So what is your true intent of crafting a story? And what do you want to tell? And how can it provide a new perspective? And to do this, remember your voice is unique. I think that's like seriously so important. Just remember who you are and what you want to tell through your own perspective. And number 3 is write the story for the love of the story. Write what you think would be fun, because, I'm an honest believer that if you have something that's a joy to write, that you'd picture as a movie and you'd go watch it, there's an audience for it. And I credit my mentors and friends in education at CSU who taught me, how to research, how to collaborate, how to think critically. And all these things have helped me become a better writer over my time, since I did start during my time at CSU. So use your network, find people who you can trust, read your drafts, and provide honest feedback to your manuscripts as you continue to develop, if you're interested in writing. Now, if you're sitting here thinking, I love to write a book, but I don't know where to start, here's the secret. Anyone can do this. Seriously, to me, writing is mainly about discipline. Can you follow through on turning an idea into a story? And so here's how you start. First, step 1, write 10 minutes a day. Just see what comes onto the page and keep doing this until you strike inspiration. And then from there, you have your story, and you can choose to set an amount of time that you write for. And 2 is start with an idea that excites you, And if you love it, others will too. And 3 is and the most important, don't wait for permission, just start. Imposter syndrome is so real. I get that. And you may be thinking there are so many good books out there. How is mine any different? But that's the beauty of writing and of art, is just be you. It's your craft, your art, and that's what will make it amazing. And lastly, so that's just an image of a Word doc page, which is the most simple way to start writing a book, is to literally just begin typing. But the image at the bottom is a great freelance site for editors that I use for my self-publishing, called Readsy. And you can get all sorts of edits for your manuscript, and it's really helpful. And then I also use a website called Fiverr, which is that other green icon there. And it's a great freelance site as well for not only editors, but you can find book cover creators. And I've formed partnerships with manuscript formatters for providing the Word doc and then taking it and turning it into book form. So there are people out there who are doing those sort of gigs that it's really fun to partner with those, small market individuals who are trying to grow their crafts, and you can really grow together as a group of indie artists at once. And so that's a really cool experience. And so I hope my little spiel here, I hope it provides you some insight onto how I think and allows you to use that information to provide your own originality onto topics you're passionate about. And you can follow all my socials at Diego Tovar Books. And then my website is diegotovarbooks.com, where you can purchase all of my books. And the most important thing is start your story, because the world needs it. And now I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm open to any questions related to CSU, my background, my environmental policy work, my writing. So thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Diego. This has been super exciting and super cool to hear about your time at CSU and all the things you've done since. I do have some questions that have been rolling in, and I just am going to ask everybody. I'll read the questions that we've gotten, and then I'm going to take a second while Diego's answering them to put it into the comments. So if you're referencing this after the fact, after we're done being live, that our viewers then can also understand what Diego is going for. But Diego, the first one I have for you is that road in Estes Park, I think, is Trail Ridge Road, but unrelated to the question.
Thank you.
They said, do you prefer to write for one audience age group versus another, and why?
That's a great question. I find myself going back and forth, and I don't know if it's just me getting bored of doing the same writing style and wanting to switch it up or not, but I find myself going from, I want to really dig deep into one character's perspective, write a first-person story, really tell a narrative that I want to share. And then in my next book, I'll step back and think, okay, in that story, the character was an adult, it was in first person. I'm going to do something completely different. I'm going to have a group of teens. I'm going to have it be in third person. I'm going to go into a bunch of characters' heads and kind of see how they all interact. And from there, I think that keeps me interested in the stories to continue to write unique narratives. So I don't necessarily have a preference per se, but I think my overall preference of writing style is to switch it up as much as possible. Also for me to become a better writer, because I'm always growing. And to me, every single book that I've written, like the one before the one I'm currently working on, always feels like an old voicemail of yourself that you're listening to. You're like, oh my gosh, like there's some cringy moments in here. But when I look back on it, I'm like, okay, this was a great piece of work. And here's how I can use that to then create something that's even better. So at the end of the day, the reason why I write is for the story, and also to just continuously improve my craft through those different styles of writing.
Awesome. Let's see. The next question is, what is your favorite book you have written? And it's two in one. And who is your favorite author?
Oh my gosh, my favorite book I've written. They're all my babies. But, I want to say, if I'm going for like deep meaning, definitely the Man on the Ring trilogy, because it really is highlighting it's a critique on how we treat climate refugees. And as someone who is in depth within the environmental space, it hits home to me most personally in terms of crafting those stories for people to be able to experience perspectives they might not be familiar with through a digestible format. Though my favorite for just like fun and silly reading, not super like morally intense, is definitely The Ascendants, Empire of Ruin. It's just a really fun story. It was cool to be writing through a young adult character through their first person experience, the collapse of systemic collapse, political collapse, alien invasions, but still like forming these friendships and bonds. And it was just a joy to write. And then my favorite author, that really switches. So I actually have some books that I pulled out here that have all inspired me. So one is called, I don't know if you'll be able to see this. Maybe you can't. Okay, I'll read them because you can't see them. One is Foundation by Asimov. And to me, his stories and the ability to create sci-fi worlds is really inspirational and allows me to develop how I build my own worlds through understanding what he did well. Another is, George Orwell. I think Animal Farm to me is such a critical book. 1984, those to me have the systemic addressing issues that I like to tackle within my work in a more climate focused way. So maybe I'll leave it there. Oh, I guess one other one is the Sand County Almanac by Aldo Leopold. And while this is actually more nonfiction, it's about Aldo Leopold and his everyday encounters with nature. And so whenever I need to ground myself back to nature and remember just what's outside of my world, what's beyond this screen, I read some of that, read different passages, and then go outside and let the animals, the plants inspire me. So, yeah.
Awesome. Let's see. A next question is, do you have any tips to practice discipline while writing?
Yes. What you could do is you could set timers for yourself. So say you want to write for 10 minutes and, 10 minutes seems daunting. Set a 2-minute timer. Force yourself to write for 2 minutes. When the timer goes up, rest for 2 minutes. Start the timer again, write for 2 minutes, and so on. So you have that constant cycle of, okay, I'm nonstop, I'm taking a break. I'm nonstop, I'm taking a break. So that is one technique I would use. Another technique, if you don't want to write for a time, if that seems daunting to be like, I don't want to limit myself to a certain amount of time, it could be open a page on a Word doc and sit there and say, I'm going to complete half a page of writing today. And then come back the next day, have a new Word page. I'm going to do 3/4 of the page. And then I'm going to do 1 page. And then I'm going to do 1 page and a quarter, all that. So those are 2 different strategies I'd use.
Awesome. I've got a little bit of a lengthy one here for you. So it says, I am not an aspiring author, but I love to read. In fact, words are not my strong suit at all, and I much prefer to consume rather than produce them. I have a dream to start my own business and have been biting my tail and getting this started. I am very inspired by you. Thank you for taking the time to do this. My question is, what advice would you give to someone in my shoes from somebody who has accomplished all of the things you have due to your own grit? Let me know if you need.
I love that question. That's a great question. Can you repeat the last part of it again, just so I can make sure I comprehend it right so I can answer it?
Yeah. So it says, my question is, what advice would you give to someone in my shoes? So someone who, in their instance, wants to start a business, it seems, from someone like yourself who has accomplished all of this largely due to your own grit and passion.
Yeah. So what I first thought about is, why am I writing? And for you, it might be, why am I starting a business? And then from there, I thought, okay, I want to accomplish these goals. And so I literally listed out my goals for myself, both in the short term and the long term. Short term, I want to write a chapter. Long term, I want to write a book. Short term, I want to develop this many characters in my story. Long term, I've developed great character dynamics. So for you in the business setting, it could be the same, developing those short-term goals and then developing those long-term goals. And those short-term goals are what takes you on the path to reach those long-term goals, which I think is extremely important. Another is, I think it's always important to have someone who is there to support you, but can critique you honestly. Having someone being able to, so for me, if I were to give my book to someone and say, hey, I just need your honest advice, like what works, what doesn't, someone who I know isn't going to beat around the bush and just tells me how it is. I think the same thing with the business approach is really helpful. Here's my strategy. Here's what I want to implement. Does this work? Do you see a reason for it? What am I missing? And that same process can be done through business and through writing. And then the last is, I think, let your passion drive you. You're obviously very passionate about wanting to start a business. So let that carry you forward. And you don't have to base productivity by how much you're tangibly outputting every day. Sometimes for me, to be a successful writer, I don't necessarily write anything beneficial. I use that writing space to then allow me to mentally be able to picture what I'm going to do next. So don't always feel like tangible results are everything. I think it's important to have a balance and being able to have those tangibility aspects, but then being able to say, you know what, I thought of this really good idea that I'm going to implement tomorrow. That's also equally as important.
I love that. Next question for you, Diego. Who or was there anyone crucial for you to connect with during your time at CSU? Do you have any advice for a current student?
Good question. So, I actually didn't have anyone who is specifically in the writing space. I think what is so special about CSU specifically is the ability to build community. And I think community was seriously what allowed me to do that. And so my best friends at CSU, letting me just say my random ideas and then being like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Or like, what the heck, Diego, that makes no sense. And then feeding off that, kind of like seeing their reactions to kind of figure out, ooh, this would be interesting to write actually, since I'm getting a reaction from them. But then also support from some of the faculty and staff within the Warner College of Natural Resources was also so crucial to me. Just having someone in my corner, being able to share expertise just about professional development, because I think a lot of like professional development things can directly correlate to writing. It's like you're trying to attain a degree, you can also try to attain writing a book, and so you can have that overlap. And I think that writing doesn't have to be like the separate orbit. I think it can be part of like your thread of your story that takes you through the end of your time at CSU and carries onward.
Okay. Speaking of your time at CSU, perhaps, you talk a lot about found friendships. Do you base any characters off of relationships you have?
Sometimes I take a character and I combine different attributes of different people in my life, because it's a way for me to feel grounded to the character and to understand different nuances. And I wouldn't say just like go copy a character off of someone especially if they don't want that, but like take small bits and pieces of just a bunch of different, interesting attributes of different people. And that can oftentimes help you at the very beginning of your writing stage on developing believable characters. And same with dialogue. Think about how different people speak and all that sort of thing, the ideations, and that will help lead to creative dialogues. So yes, at the beginning, I definitely leaned on that more than I do now.
Let's see. How hard was the process to get your books published?
So I'm self-publishing, so very, very easy. So literally all you have to do is you type out the book. That's the hardest part. Complete the book, right? And then once you have the book, you go through different editing phases. So you have the editorial assessment, which is basically once you're done reading, you look through, you find major plot holes, right? Wait, this character had a sword in this scene and now they have a taser? Like, that doesn't make sense. Stuff like that. And then the next edit is like developmental edit. You look at like specific dialogue, you look at, okay, this character has this story that connects with this other character. Are you threading it nicely? Stuff like that. Do the chapters have a reasonable start and end that moves the narrative forward? That sort of thing. So you have editorial, developmental, and copy edit, which is where you literally just go through and look for grammatical errors. So, oops, I added 2 commas. Oops, I spelled a word wrong. Stuff like that. Or like, oops, I said they were wearing a brown shirt and then later I described it as gray. Got to fix that. Stuff like that. So minor grammatical and story errors. And then after that, you usually do one more edit called a proofread, which you just read for enjoyment. Just read through it as the audience, as your first time reader, and try to go through that story. And then from there, then you go on to either Readsy or Fiverr, and you get the proper edits done, the manuscript formatting done, and then you can self-publish. And I self-publish through Amazon KDP. And if you literally Google Amazon KDP, it comes up and it lets you have like a glossy cover, a matte cover. You can have a hard cover. You can have a paperback. soft cover, you can have an ebook, all sorts of things like that. So that was my process. And I guess I should throw in, as you write more, you don't have to spend so much money on editors every single time. So I've been able to now wean myself off editors, and I just do it myself.
Awesome. I'm going to expand on that and then also combine two questions together. So first one is, what is the difference between getting published and self-publishing? And then the second one is, how do you get to be an Amazon bestselling author? What was that process like?
So the first question, if you want to be traditionally published, what you do is there's a website called Query Tracker, Query, and then Tracker. And it comes up with every single literary agent known to man. And then you go through, you find genres that these literary agents are looking for. And then you basically submit a query letter. And then once you submit, and the query letter itself is like, hi, I'm so excited to share about my story. Then you have a hook. And then you usually have a brief synopsis. And then you have comparison books and what the audience of your book is, who is it tailored to, because the literary agent wants to know the marketability of your book. So that's step one. And then once you submit those query letters in, usually it takes anywhere from 3 to 9 months to get a response. Once you hear a response, they'll either say, I'm going to pass. They're going to say, I would like 3 chapters of your book to review. Or they'll say, I want like half the book to review. Then you wait around, I don't know, anywhere from 3 to 12 months. You get that back. And then you submit a full manuscript. And then you usually wait another same month time period. And then from there, if you get chosen, you'll be represented by that literary agent, and then they'll walk you through the traditionally publishing route. For me, partially because I'm impatient, I just want to keep pumping out stories, and I just love making stories. So I just have to get the books out because I have so many ideas in my brain. And as where I am right now, I enjoy the self-publishing process, and I enjoy the writing aspect, and then self-publishing it, marketing myself through my website, my social media. The creative control is 100% is mine, and I do it that way right now. The second part is, so to become an Amazon bestselling author, you have to attend or maintain a certain amount of sales per day against other books in your category. So for me, I was an Amazon bestselling author for the Ascendants, Empire of Ruin, for the young adult category, for the young adult sci-fi category, the young adult alien category, and the overall new science fiction release category. And so within those categories, I had managed to reach Amazon bestseller status after, it goes like 2 weeks through looking at the sales and all that, and it compares them against all other books that exist. And then from there, Amazon does the rankings for you. So you don't have to like seek it out. It will just appear by Amazon.
I'm learning so much. I had no idea there was an alien genre on Amazon. That's so funny. Speaking of genres, next question is, would you ever try any other genres?
Yeah, so The Wrath That Waits is my first book that isn't sci-fi or cli-fi. It's more of like a, I don't know, gothic horror. But, I don't know what it is, but my brain just like makes me write in sci-fi. It just feels like a second language to me. And The Wrath That Waits is a great novella, and I love it. But like when I was complete with it, I was like, oh my gosh, I miss writing in sci-fi. So it's just my style. If I were to write something outside of it, I'd probably write something creepy and write just a straight up horror novel. I don't know why. I really like tragedies. I really like stories where the main character doesn't always win. I like that because I think it leaves the readers questioning more things than with answers. And I like that. I like there to be conversation. So I'd probably do something like that.
Awesome. We have a couple more questions that we've got for you. Just a reminder, I've noticed the questions have started to slow down a little bit. So if you have any other questions while Diego's answering these next 3 or so, go ahead and send them over and then we'll keep going. But if not, we'll see where our question field gets us. So Diego, the second question we have is, where can I buy your books? Is there anywhere in person?
So I think there are a few at the CSU library right now, actually, the CSU bookstore, which is fun. In Fort Collins, your best bet is through my website.
Perfect. Sorry, I just had to finish typing that. And again, when we're mentioning Diego's website, you can see that on the bottom here. And in any of our post-event emails, we'll make sure to also plug Diego's website. So make sure you all get very connected. Let's see. Diego, what is next for you? Anything on the horizon that I can keep on my radar after I finish reading all of your books?
Yeah, I'm actually working on a few different projects right now. So I'm working on a sci-fi novel, and it's an adult novel. It follows a few different characters. I'm trying to critique the mining industry in this book through a sci-fi setting. That's about, I don't know, maybe a fourth of the way done. I have this middle grade novel that I was inspired by. One of my favorite books as a kid, when I was in 5th grade, I read them all, was Gregor the Overlander by Suzanne Collins. And Suzanne Collins wrote The Hunger Games. And so this was what she had written before The Hunger Games for a younger middle school audience. And so I had thought, you know what, that book was so inspiring to me as a kid that I want to try writing something in the middle school genre. So I've actually completed a novel in that range that follows two kids who, get teleported into like this crazy environment filled with talking animals, all that kind of stuff. And the goal is to get kids to think about what's around them in nature. And so I'll probably release that sometime on the horizon. And what else am I working on? I have a sci-fi horror book that I've completed that I just haven't released yet. So that might be next. It's about basically this scientist who tries to genetically modify these insects for the betterment of humanity, and it goes horribly wrong. So those are three of the projects that I can think of at the top of my head. Though I got all of these ideas rolling, and so definitely more to come from me.
Awesome. Other question for you. Can you remind me of the difference between sci-fi and cli-fi? I have never heard of cli-fi.
Yeah, so the big difference is sci-fi focuses on those environmental issues. So you have your traditional science fiction, and then the sci-fi is climate fiction. So it relates to, it could be both dystopian or utopian. So for dystopian, a classic example is a ring around Earth, and the Earth is destroyed, and climate refugees are living on that ring, like in my story, The Man on the Ring. It could be a deserted planet, or it could be a utopia, in whatever form the writer views utopia as. It could be a place where there's clean energy and people are living and thriving in this new world. It could be where it is desolate, but there are these people who are grounded to nature and are living off the land, and that, in a way, could be utopia. So it's really about how the writer perceives climate and the environment and sustainability.
Awesome. Do you have a writing group or a place to go to get feedback on your manuscripts?
Yeah, no, I actually don't. What I do is I just ask my friends, because I think sometimes having people who aren't in the writing space to look at it is a good reference point to figure out, like, what does like an average reader think of the story, if that makes sense. And I provide it to be the most honest feedback.
Okay. Got two more questions for you. So again, if anyone else has anything, go ahead and pop it in here. But how do you handle setbacks or burnout? I'm scared to pursue this because I don't want to stop loving something I love.
Yeah, that's valid. So when I feel some sort of setback, oftentimes I'll stop writing and I'll think, okay, well, what is the root cause of that setback? What is the barrier that I can't get over? And usually it's not within, for me, it's usually not within the actual writing. It's like dreading going back and fixing something that I need to fix in like multiple chapters. So a lot of times when that happens for me, I just think, okay, well, I love this story and I have something I want to tell, But I just need to set a goal for myself and, not write anything new, but spend the next couple days just rewriting or just reworking on this one section to make sure that the story continues to flow. So that's usually how it goes for me. A lot of times too, about halfway through the book, you'll start to question everything. You'll be like, oh my gosh, wait, halfway through, is the plot strong enough? Are these characters believable? I don't know how I feel about this. Just keep going, because you don't know what it's going to look like because you haven't finished it. And that's something I started to learn as I wrote more and more is, yeah, it might feel half-baked, but it literally is, because you've written half the story, and that's okay. And so let it come to fruition. Let it be fully baked. Have this idea. And then even when it's done, it's okay if it's, not up to your standard or not up to what you're hoping for. Take a step back from it, and then go back and edit. And it's just as simple as that. And it's just continuing to rework the words, rework different sections of the story until you feel like it's perfect. And there's no timeline either. I really worried about that at the beginning of my writing career. I was like, oh my gosh, I just released this book. I really need to get this other one out. And then I realized I'm writing for me. At the end of the day, I'm writing because it's my space of meditation. And that allowed me to realize that there are no such things as deadlines in a self-published writer's world, because you can release a story at any time you want. So you can release 2 stories back to back. You can release a story a year apart. It's really about how you approach and not feeling like you have to rush to get the next thing out, and make sure to celebrate small victories. Celebrate the first chapter you wrote, celebrate the first draft you wrote. Those are big milestones that not many people are able to accomplish, and give yourself a pat on the back for that, because that's equally as important.
All right, I have a funny one that makes me laugh a little bit, but this one is: do you still keep in touch with CSU? What is your favorite FOCO restaurant?
Okay, so my favorite FOCO restaurant. Man, that's tough. I love Uno Mas. Uno Mas tacos, so good. I have to go with Uno Mas. That was my gut instinct there. Oh my gosh, what's the place, Sophie, you might know this. This isn't a restaurant, but what's the boba place right off Prospect? Have you been?
Right off of Prospect? I know there's one, there's a Ding Tea on Elizabeth.
That's what it is.
Near
I
Crazy
love
Cars.
Ding
Yep.
Tea. I'm a huge Ding Tea stan. I love that place.
That is
And
awesome.
what was the first part of the question?
Do you still keep in touch with CSU? Which
Oh, yeah.
you're doing something with CSU right now, so.
Yeah, 100%. My best friends, still my best friends from CSU, so I literally talk to them basically every single day. I keep in touch with faculty and staff. Actually, some alumni and I from CSU all got together here in DC just like 2 weeks ago and just hung out. We're like, oh, you went to CSU? Cool, let's go hang out. So yeah, definitely. And I think that the RAM community is just amazing to be a part of. And I truly feel so lucky to be a RAM because of that aspect.
Awesome. I've got kind of just a closing question then for you that I like to ask everybody. First question is, what is your favorite CSU memory?
Favorite.
Or pick
So
one of the favorites.
yeah, there's so many. Okay, to get the cheesy answer out of the way first, definitely like the friendships I formed. Like that's got to be number one, because those people are still in my life and like they'll be friends for the rest of my life. So that's one. But then like non-cheesy answer, like literally every single CSU basketball game. I am such a big basketball fan. I remember my senior year, David Roddy was there. It was a blast. We made March Madness that year, like we did this year. Go Rams. So going to basketball games with my friends.
Awesome. Okay, I don't think we have any more comments, but Diego, should somebody from this webinar or who's watching it back want to get in contact with you, what's the best way for someone to keep in touch?
Yeah, I'm happy to share my email. There's also a place on my website where you can directly ask me questions that just go straight to my email. But I'm happy to share my email.
And you have social media, right?
Yes, or through my social media, which is Diego Tovar Books. And that's on Instagram and TikTok are the two that I mainly use.
Awesome. Great. Well, then, let's see if there's no other questions. Let us know if you want to get in contact with Diego via email. I'm happy to facilitate that, and he's also available through the outlets that he shared. But Diego, I think we'll call it there. So thank you everyone for joining, and for Diego for taking the time to join us. I know everybody here would give you a large virtual round of applause. And I just want to let everyone know, if you joined late or if you missed this recording will be available immediately afterwards. You can either refresh it, or we'll send out the link as well to everyone who joined. So just refresh your page and catch up on what we talked about in the beginning here. But for a final closing, Diego, is there any last words of wisdom or pieces of advice you would want to end on?
Yeah, just follow what you're passionate about and just keep the ball rolling on whatever that is. A victory looks different for everyone. A success looks different for everyone. Never compare yourself to others, and just be you, and that will lead to what is successful to you.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, thank you, Diego. Thank you for everyone joining. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and go Rams.
Go Rams.